It started on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning where the sun stretched lazily over the fields, and the only sound was the gentle sway of corn in the breeze. But peace never lasts long when a certain neighbor decides she owns the world. Karen, head of the local HOA, had already made herself notorious for nitpicking everything from mailbox colors to the angle of garden fences. But this time, she went too far. She stood at the edge of the farm, arms folded, glaring at the red barn as if it were her sworn enemy. "This doesn't belong here," she snapped to no one in particular. Within minutes, she had her phone out and dialed 911. The absurdity was almost cinematic. She reported suspicious activity on land that had been in David's family for generations. David, the farmer, heard the sirens before he saw them. His heart sank, not out of guilt but out of disbelief. How could a neighbor twist peace into chaos so easily? What Karen didn't know, what the officers didn't know, was that David carried a truth that could shatter her arrogance in an instant, and as the patrol car slowed down the gravel road, David realized this wasn't just about crops or barns. This was about respect, land, and a badge he hadn't worn in years. Blue lights flickered against the red barn, casting a surreal glow over the farm. Two officers stepped out, their faces serious but uncertain, as though unsure why they were called at all. Behind them, Karen strutted proudly, pointing like she'd uncovered a crime scene. "This farm violates HOA code," she announced dramatically, waving her arms as though she were delivering a breaking news report. "Unauthorized structures, dangerous animals, and who knows what else." Her voice rose with every accusation. The officers exchanged puzzled glances. "Ma'am, this is farmland, not suburban housing," one replied gently. But Karen was relentless. "It doesn't matter. The HOA rules apply to everyone here. I have proof." David stayed calm, watching the scene unfold. He could have shouted, he could have argued, but instead, he waited. Years of discipline had taught him the value of silence at the right time. Finally, when the officers approached him, he looked them squarely in the eyes. "Sir, may we see some identification?" one asked. David nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket, not for farm papers, not for deeds, but something far more powerful. His hand brushed against the leather wallet that held the secret Karen could never have imagined. David held the wallet firmly, the weight of his past pressing into his palm. With one swift motion, he opened it. The polished glint of silver caught the sunlight. The officers froze. Karen blinked rapidly, her confident smirk vanishing. It wasn't just an ID card. It was a badge. The very badge David had worn proudly during his years as a federal investigator. Retired, yes, but still commanding respect. The silence stretched until one of the officers finally breathed, "Sir. You're law enforcement?" David nodded calmly. "Retired. But the badge still means something." Karen stumbled backward. This doesn't matter. You can't just wave some badge around and ignore the HOA." But now, the tables had turned. The officer's attention shifted from Karen's frantic claims to David's composed authority. He didn't need to shout. His badge spoke louder than her accusations. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "this land isn't under HOA jurisdiction. And making a false emergency call is a serious offense." Karen's jaw dropped. Her plan, her bravado, her sense of power, it all crumbled in that instant. Yet David knew this was just the beginning. Exposing the truth was one thing, but proving ownership, proving legacy, that would take more. The officers, now respectful, asked David if he had any documents to support his ownership. David motioned toward the farmhouse. Inside, a wooden chest sat by the fireplace, filled with yellowed papers and deeds passed down through generations. He opened the chest carefully, pulling out an aged parchment. "This land has been in my family since 1892, he explained. The ink had faded, but the seal was unmistakable. One officer whistled softly, impressed. Karen, however, wasn't ready to back down. "That paper could be fake. The HOA charter says," but before she could finish, David set the parchment beside a thick folder. Inside were modern deeds, tax receipts, and notarized records. Every page screamed legitimacy. Every stamp silenced doubt. Karen's face flushed with frustration. For years, she had bullied neighbors into submission, waving HOA rules like weapons. But this time, she was outmatched not just by paper, but by authority, history, and unshakable truth. David didn't gloat. Instead, he looked her in the eye and said quietly, "You can't own what was never yours." Karen refused to surrender. "This is harassment," she screeched. "I'll take this to court. I'll have every lawyer in town," but her voice trembled. For the first time, doubt crept into her tone. The officers, now visibly annoyed, warned her, "Ma'am, you need to calm down. This is a lawful property. If you continue making false claims, there will be consequences." Karen's bravado cracked. She had built her reputation on fear, but now her audience wasn't bending, they were resisting. David stood quietly, his calm presence more powerful than any angry outburst. "I tried to be neighborly," he said softly, "but you left me no choice. You brought the law into this, and the law doesn't bend for arrogance." Karen's lips quivered, but she pressed on with one final attempt. "The HOA owns the right of way to this road, so technically, he can't even reach his farm without us." A hush fell. It was her last card, her desperate move. But David had one more truth waiting, one that would leave her truly speechless. David walked back to the chest and pulled out one last folder. Inside was a map stamped with the county's seal. He spread it across the table. The officers leaned in. Karen craned her neck, her confidence flickering like a dying flame. "This," David said, tapping the map, "is the survey of this land. Not only does the road run through my property, it was built by my grandfather, before this neighborhood ever existed." The realization hit like a thunderclap. The HOA road Karen bragged about? It wasn't theirs at all. It was David's. Every inch of gravel, every stretch of fence line, it belonged to him. The officers straightened, now firm. "Ma'am, you've wasted our time, endangered resources, and harassed your neighbor. This ends here." Karen's face drained of color. For years, she had believed she controlled everything. But in that moment, standing in a farmhouse lit by truth, she realized she controlled nothing. David didn't smile. He didn't need to. The weight of truth was victory enough. The officers packed up their notes. Karen stood in stunned silence, her arguments shattered beyond repair. David walked them to the door, his badge glinting once more in the fading sunlight. On the porch, he paused. "Gentlemen," he said, "thank you for respecting the truth. Sometimes, the loudest voice in the room isn't the right one." They nodded respectfully before driving away, leaving Karen alone in the driveway, her power drained. She turned to David, but no words came. For once, Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of rules, was speechless. David turned back toward the barn, his heart steady. The land was his, the truth was his, and peace was his. The badge had spoken, but more importantly, his family's legacy had spoken louder, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.